Here's a question that sounds ridiculous until you actually look into it. How much of the Parmesan cheese in your fridge right now is actually wood? I'm not being dramatic. In 2016, the FDA and an independent lab caught major grocery store Parmesan brands padding their 100% Parmesan cheese with an ingredient called cellulose, a plant fiber filler most commonly sourced from wood pulp. One brand tested at almost 9% filler. 9% of what you thought was pure cheese wasn't cheese at all, and that's just Parmesan. Once you start pulling this thread, you find an entire hidden category of grocery store products that are legally not allowed to be called cheese. They're called cheese product, cheese food, or my personal favorite, prepared cheese product. Same aisle, same packaging style, completely different rulebook. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which 6 products to be skeptical of, why they're allowed to get away with it, and 5 brands that do it the right way: real milk, real cultures, nothing hiding behind fine print. Let's get into it. Let's start with the biggest myth in the dairy aisle. The word cheese on a label doesn't mean what you assume it means. The FDA actually has a legal definition of cheese, and it's stricter than most people realize. To be called cheese, just plain cheese, a product has to be made primarily from milk, milk fat, and cheese cultures, with very limited additives. But manufacturers found a workaround decades ago. If a product doesn't meet that bar, it doesn't have to say "not cheese" on the front. It just gets a different technical name on the ingredients panel: pasteurized processed cheese food, pasteurized prepared cheese product, things that sound almost identical to cheese if you're not reading closely. Here's the wild part. This isn't a conspiracy theory or some internet rumor. This is published FDA labeling law, sitting right there in the Code of Federal Regulations. The government requires companies to disclose it, but the language is boring enough, and the fine print is small enough that almost nobody ever reads it. So before we name names, that's the trick to watch for on every single product going forward. If the front of the package says cheese, but the ingredient panel or the fine print says cheese product, cheese food, or prepared cheese product, that's not a synonym. That's a legal downgrade. Keep that in your back pocket, because it's going to come up again and again in this video. Let's start with the case that kicked off this entire investigation in the first place. Back in 2016, Bloomberg commissioned independent lab testing on grated Parmesan cheese sold in major grocery chains, specifically testing for cellulose, an anti-caking filler. The FDA considers cellulose, generally recognized as safe, and a small amount somewhere between 2 and 4% is considered a normal, acceptable level in pre-shredded cheese to prevent clumping. That part isn't controversial. What was controversial was what the lab found in Jewel Osco's store brand, essential everyday 100% grated Parmesan cheese. It tested at 8.8% cellulose, more than double the upper end of what's considered normal. Think about that phrase, 100% grated Parmesan cheese, printed right on the front of the package, while independent lab testing found the product was more than 8% something else entirely. That's not a rounding error. That's a product where nearly 1 in every 12 bites wasn't the cheese you paid for. This wasn't an isolated slip, either. It triggered actual consumer fraud lawsuits. This is documented, tested, and litigated. Which brings us to the next brand caught in the same investigation. Same 2016 investigation, same lab, different logo: Walmart's Great Value 100% grated Parmesan cheese. The independent test results showed 7.8% cellulose content. Again, nearly double the accepted upper limit for an anti-caking agent, in a product labeled as 100% Parmesan. Walmart was named in a follow-up class action lawsuit over the labeling, right alongside Kraft. Now, to be fair to Walmart for a second, in that same round of testing, Kraft's grated Parmesan came in at 3.8%, which is right at the edge of the normal range, not wildly over it. So not every big brand tested badly. But Great Value's number was one of the worst in the entire report. Here's why this one stings a little more than most. Store brands often market themselves as the smart choice, same quality, lower price. And sometimes that's completely true. But 100% Parmesan cheese is a specific, testable claim. When an independent lab puts a number on it and it comes in at nearly double the acceptable filler threshold, that's not a smart buy anymore. It's a product that isn't what its own label says it is. Now we move out of the Parmesan aisle and into something almost every American household has bought at some point: individually wrapped cheese slices. Kraft singles are one of the most recognizable products in the entire dairy case. But here's the detail buried in the fine print: Kraft singles are not legally allowed to be labeled simply as cheese. According to FDA rules, a product needs at least 51% actual cheese content to earn that basic processed cheese designation. Kraft singles fall under that number, which is why the actual legal name on the package is pasteurized prepared cheese product, a category the FDA doesn't even formally regulate the same way, because manufacturers use it specifically when their product doesn't meet the stricter standards. To be clear, this isn't a food safety issue. The ingredients are legal, they're on the label, and the FDA has approved every one of them. Nobody's health is at risk here. This is purely a "what are you actually paying for" issue. You're buying a manufactured cheese-adjacent product engineered for a perfect melt, a long shelf life, and total consistency, not a natural, minimally processed cheese. If you've ever wondered why Kraft singles taste and feel completely uniform, slice after slice, package after package, that consistency is the entire point of the formulation. It's a food science product first, and a cheese second. Sticking with the same company, let's talk about Velveeta, because it's an even more extreme version of the same story. Velveeta is owned by Kraft Heinz, and like Kraft singles, its official FDA classification is pasteurized prepared cheese product, not cheese, not even processed cheese food. The formulation is built for one specific superpower: an ultra-smooth melt that never breaks, never gets oily, and stays completely uniform even reheated. That's exactly why it's the go-to for queso dips and casseroles. It performs a job that natural cheese genuinely struggles with. But performance isn't the same as authenticity. When a product is engineered that heavily for texture and shelf stability, the ingredient list moves further away from milk, salt, cultures, enzymes, and further toward whey, milk protein concentrates, and emulsifying salts stacked on top of a cheese base. Again, not dangerous, not illegal, just worth knowing exactly what you're melting into that dip at your next party. This next category is the one that surprises people the most, because it hides in plain sight on frozen pizzas, on fast food menus, and in the deli case at the grocery store: imitation cheese, sometimes called cheese analog. Here's how it works. Real cheese gets its structure, flavor, and melt from milk fat. Imitation cheese swaps some or all of that milk fat out for vegetable oil, usually a cheaper option like palm oil or soybean oil, then rebuilds the texture using starches and stabilizers to mimic real cheese's stretch and melt. Why does this exist? Cost, mainly. Milk fat is expensive and its price fluctuates. Vegetable oil is cheap and stable. For a company selling millions of frozen pizzas or fast food orders a year, swapping even a portion of the dairy fat for vegetable oil can save an enormous amount of money, and most customers will never notice the difference, because the melt and stretch are engineered to look identical. The tell is almost always in the ingredient list, not the marketing. If you see vegetable oil, modified food starch, or cheese analog anywhere near the top of an ingredient panel on something marketed as cheese, mozzarella, or cheese blend, that's your signal to keep reading before you keep eating. Last one in our watch out list, and it's probably sitting in your pantry right now: the powdered cheese packet that comes with boxed macaroni and cheese, or shows up in cheese-flavored popcorn and snack seasonings. Look closely at the ingredient list on one of these packets sometime. The first ingredient is almost always whey, a dairy byproduct, not cheese itself. From there, you'll typically find milk fat, milk protein concentrate, salt, and a collection of preservatives, coloring, and flavor enhancers designed to recreate the taste and smell of cheese without needing much actual cheese to do it. It's a cheese flavor system, built from cheese-adjacent dairy ingredients, not dehydrated, ground-up cheese, which is what most people picture when they see cheese powder on the box. There's nothing dangerous about that. It's just another example of the gap between what a product is named and what a product actually is. Okay, 6 products down. Before we get to the brands doing it right, let's arm you with a fast, repeatable system, because you're not going to remember 6 specific brand names next time you're standing in the dairy aisle. Here's the shortcut. Flip the package over and check 2 things. First, the legal name near the top of the label, not the marketing name on the front. If it says cheese or natural cheese, that's the strongest tier. If it says processed cheese or processed cheese food, that's the middle tier, mostly real cheese, blended and stabilized. If it says prepared cheese product or cheese product, that's the bottom tier, technically dairy adjacent, but legally not allowed to call itself cheese. Second, look at the first 3 ingredients. Real cheese should start with some version of milk, cheese culture, salt, and enzymes. If you see vegetable oil, modified starch, or whey protein concentrate sitting near the top of the list, ahead of actual cheese, that's a strong signal you're looking at an imitation or heavily engineered product. 10 seconds, 2 checks, and you'll catch almost everything we just talked about. Now for the good news, because this video isn't just about what to avoid, it's about where to actually put your money instead. 2 names consistently come up from cheese industry experts as trustworthy, high-quality producers of authentic Italian-style hard cheeses made in the United States: Belgioioso and Sartori. Both are based in Wisconsin. Both specialize in traditional cheese-making methods, and both were specifically named by cheese industry insiders as reliable brands to look for when the Parmesan cellulose scandal broke, as the credible alternative to the padded store brands we just covered. If you're someone who grates your own Parmesan or buys pre-grated hard cheeses regularly, these 2 names are worth actively seeking out on the shelf. They're not always the cheapest option in the aisle, but given what we just walked through about what cheap Parmesan can actually contain, that price difference starts to make a lot more sense. The third name that came up repeatedly alongside Belgioioso and Sartori as a trustworthy source for authentic hard Italian cheeses is Arthur Schumann Inc. Arthur Schumann is a major importer and producer specializing in authentic Italian cheeses, and like the previous 2 brands, it was specifically pointed to by industry experts as a name to trust after the Parmesan filler scandal made national headlines. If you've ever seen a wedge of imported Parmigiano Reggiano or Grana Padano at a specialty grocery store, there's a good chance a company like this one had something to do with getting it onto that shelf, handled the traditional way, without shortcuts. The pattern across all 3 of these brands is the same. They build their reputation on doing the traditional process correctly, rather than engineering around it. That's exactly the opposite instinct from the 6 products we just covered. Last category, and this one's a genuinely useful shopping trick: farmer-owned cooperative dairy brands. 2 of the most recognizable names in this space are Tillamook and Cabot Creamery. Both operate as cooperatives owned directly by dairy farmers rather than as divisions of a massive processed food conglomerate. That structure matters because a co-op's entire business model is built around selling the actual milk their farmer owners produce, not around engineering the cheapest possible cheese-adjacent product at scale. That doesn't automatically make every product from every co-op perfect. Always flip the package over and run the 10-second check from Chapter 8 on any brand every time. But structurally, cooperative dairy brands tend to have less